Learning outcomes. After studying this module, you shall be able to gain an insight into price discrimination, identify the different forms of price discrimination, and understand the two-part tariff, which is a price structure having two parts. Introduction. A business can use a variety of pricing methods when selling a product or service. One of the pricing rules commonly used in the monopoly market is price discrimination. Price discrimination is a pricing strategy where identical or largely similar goods or services are transacted at different prices by the sellers in different markets. It exists when a firm has market power and can prevent or limit arbitrage, and when consumers differ in their demands for a given good or service. Price discrimination. As discussed in the earlier module, a monopoly operates at an inefficient level of output since it restricts output to a point where people are willing to pay more for extra output than it costs to produce it. The monopolist doesn't want to produce this extra output because it would force down the price that it would be able to get for all of its output. But if the monopolist could sell different units of output at different prices, then it is possible for him to maximize profits. The practice of charging different prices for the same product to different consumers is called price discrimination. Examples of price discrimination include senior citizen discounts for restaurant meals, students' concession on railway fares, doctor charging different fees from different patients, etc. Conditions necessary for price discrimination. To sustain discriminating prices, it is essential that the following conditions are met. The firm ought to enjoy the status of a price maker, preferably a monopolist. The willingness of the consumers to pay should vary, that is, the price elasticity of demand of different consumers has to be different. Without this, it is not possible to charge different prices. While price elasticity may be different, the seller may not be aware of this. A consumer who is willing to pay more may not reveal this. It is therefore absolutely essential that the seller have the information on how much each consumer is willing to pay. And lastly, it should not be possible for the consumers to transfer the goods or services from one group to another. In other words, buyers should not indulge in arbitrage. Forms of price discrimination. There are three kinds of price discrimination: first degree price discrimination, second degree price discrimination, and third degree price discrimination. First degree price discrimination. Under first degree price discrimination, the monopolist sells different units of output for different prices, and these prices may differ from person to person. This is sometimes known as the case of perfect price discrimination. Each unit of the good is sold to the individual who values it most highly at the maximum price that this individual is willing to pay for it. Consider figure 3.1, which illustrates two consumers' demand curves for a good with constant marginal cost. Think of a reservation price model for demand where the individuals choose integer amounts of the goods, and each step in the demand curve represents a change in the willingness to pay for additional units of good. A producer who is able to perfectly price discriminate will sell each unit of the good at the highest price it will command, that is, at each consumer's reservation price. Since each unit is sold to each consumer at his reservation price, there is no consumer surplus generated in this market. The entire surplus goes to the producer. In figure 3.1, the blue colored areas indicate the producer surplus accruing to the monopolist. In an ordinary competitive market, however, setting these areas would represent consumer surplus, but in the case of perfect price discrimination, monopolist is able to appropriate the surplus for itself. Since the producer gets the entire surplus in the market, it wants to make sure that the surplus is as large as possible. In other words, the producer's goal is to maximize its profits, that is producer surplus, subject to the constraint that the consumers are just willing to purchase the good. This means that the outcome will be Pareto efficient, since there will be no way to make the consumers and the producers better off. The producer's profit can't be increased since it is already the maximum possible profit, and the consumer's surplus can't be increased without reducing the profit of the producer. If we move to the smooth demand curve approximation as given in figure 3.2, we see that a perfectly price discriminating monopolist must produce at an output level where price equals marginal cost. If price were greater than marginal cost, that would mean that there is someone who is willing to pay more than it costs to produce an extra unit of output. In this case of perfect price discrimination, the producer ends up getting the entire surplus generated in the market. We have interpreted first degree price discrimination as selling each unit at the maximum price it will command. In the case illustrated in figure 3.2, the monopolist would offer to sell x1 units of the good to person 1 at a price equal to the area under person 1's demand curve A, and offer to sell x2 units of good to person 2 at a price equal to the area under person 2's demand curve B. Each person would end up with zero consumer surplus, and the entire surplus of A plus B would end up in the hands of the monopolist. Perfect price discrimination is an idealized concept, as the word perfect might suggest, but it is interesting theoretically since it gives us an example of resource allocation mechanism other than a competitive market that achieves Pareto efficiency. There are very few real-life examples of perfect price discrimination. The closest example would be something like a small town doctor who charges his patients different prices based on their ability to pay. Second degree price discrimination. Second degree price discrimination means that the monopolist sells different units of output for different prices, but every individual who buys the same amount of the good pays the same price. Thus, prices differ across the units of the good but not across people. Second degree price discrimination is also known as the case of non-linear pricing, since it means that the price per unit of output is not constant but depends on how much you buy. This form of price discrimination is commonly used by public utilities. For example, the price per unit of electricity often depends on how much is bought. In other industries, bulk discounts for large purchases are sometimes available. Now let us consider the case depicted earlier in figure 3.2. We saw that the monopolist would like to sell an amount x1 to person 1 at price A plus the cost and an amount x2 to person 2 at price B plus cost. To set the right prices, the monopolist has to know the demand curves of the consumers. That is, the monopolist has to know the exact willingness to pay of each person. Even if the monopolist knows something about the statistical distribution of willingness to pay, for example, an airline ticket agent may know that business travelers are willing to pay more than tourists for their airplane tickets, but it is often difficult to tell whether a particular person is a business traveler or a tourist. The problem with the first degree price discrimination example, which was depicted in figure 3.2, is that person 1, the high willingness to pay person, can pretend to be person 2, the low willingness to pay person. The seller may have no effective way to tell them apart. One way to get around this problem is to offer two different price quantity packages in the market. One package will be targeted toward the high demand person, the other package toward the low demand person. It can often happen that the monopolist can construct price quantity packages that will induce the consumers to choose the package meant for them. That is, the monopolists construct price quantity packages that give the consumers an incentive to self-select. In order to see how this works, let us look at figure 3.3. This figure illustrates the same kind of demand curves used in figure 3.2, but now laid on top of each other. The marginal cost is set equal to 0 in this diagram to keep the argument simple. As before, the monopolist would like to offer x1 at price A and to offer x2 at price A plus B plus C. This would capture the entire surplus for the monopolist and generate the most possible profit. The high demand consumer would find it optimal to choose the quantity x1 and pay price A. This would leave him with a surplus equal to B, which is better than the zero surplus he would get if he chose x2. One thing the monopolist can do is to offer x2 at a price of A plus C. In this case, the high demand consumer finds it optimal to choose x2 and receive a gross surplus of A plus B plus C. He pays the monopolist A plus C, which yields a net surplus of B for consumer 2, just what he should get if he chose x1. This generally yields more profit to the monopolist than it would get by offering only one price quantity combination. There is yet a further thing the monopolist can do to increase profits. Suppose that instead of offering x1 at price A to the low demand consumer, the monopolist offers a bit less than that at a price slightly less than A. This reduces the monopolist's profits on person 1 by the small color triangle which is illustrated in figure 3.3b. But note that since person 1's package is now less attractive to person 2, the monopolist can now charge more to person 2 for x2. By reducing x1, the monopolist makes area A a little smaller but makes area C bigger by the triangle plus the little trapezoid area. The net result is that the monopolist's profits increase. Continuing in this way, the monopolist will want to reduce the amount offered to person 1 up to the point where the profit lost on person 1 due to a further reduction in output just equals the profit gained on person 2. At this point, as illustrated in figure 3.3c, the marginal benefits and cost of quantity reduction just balance. Person 1 chooses xm1 and is charged A. Person 2 chooses x2 and is charged A plus C plus D, and person 1 ends up with a zero surplus and person 2 ends up with a surplus of B. Just what he would get if he chose to consume XM1. In practice, the monopolist often encourages this self-selection, not by adjusting the quantity of the good, as in this example, but rather by adjusting the quality of the good. The quantities in the model just examined can be reinterpreted as qualities, and everything works as before. In general, the monopolist will want to reduce the quality offered to the low end of its market so as to cannibalize sales at the high end. Without the high end consumers, the low end consumers would be offered higher quality, but they would still end up with zero surplus. Without the low end consumers, the high end consumers would have zero surplus, so it is beneficial to the high end consumers to have the low end consumers present. This is because the monopolist has to cut the price to the high end consumers to discourage them from choosing the product targeted to the low end consumers. Third degree price discrimination. Third degree price discrimination occurs when monopolist sells output to different people for different prices, but every unit of the output sold to a given person sells for the same price. This is the most common form of price discrimination, and examples include senior citizens discounts, students discounts, etc. Suppose that the monopolist is able to identify two groups of people and can sell an item to each group at a different price. Assume that the consumers in each market are not able to resell the good. Let P1Y1 and P2Y2 denote the inverse demand curves of groups 1 and 2 respectively, and let's see Y1 plus Y2 be the cost of producing output. Then the profit maximizing problem facing the monopolist is maximize Y1 Y2, which is P1 Y1 into Y1 plus P2 Y2 into Y2 minus C Y1 plus Y2. The optimal solution must have the marginal revenue equal to the marginal cost for each group. That is, MR1 Y1 should be equal to MC Y1 plus Y2. This MR2 Y2 equal to MC Y1 plus Y2. That is, the marginal cost of producing an extra unit of output must be equal to the marginal revenue in each market. If the marginal revenue in market 1 exceeded marginal cost, it would pay to expand output in market 1, and similarly for market 2. Now, since marginal cost is same in each market, this means of course that the marginal revenue in each market should also be the same. Thus, a good should bring the same increase in revenue whether it is sold in market 1 or market 2. Now, using the standard elasticity formula for marginal revenue, the profit maximization conditions can be written as P1 Y1 1 minus 1 by epsilon 1 Y1, which is equal to MC Y1 plus Y2, and P2 Y2 into 1 minus 1 by epsilon 2 Y2 should be equal to MC Y1 plus Y2, where epsilon 1 Y1 and epsilon 2 Y2 represents the elasticities of demand in the respective markets, which are evaluated at the profit maximizing choices of output. If P1 is greater than P2, then 1 minus 1 epsilon 1 Y1 is less than 1 minus 1 by epsilon 2 Y2, which in turn implies that 1 by epsilon 1 Y1 is greater than 1 by epsilon 2 Y2. This means that epsilon 2 Y2 should be greater than epsilon 1 Y1. Thus, the market with high price must have the lower elasticity of demand. Now, since an elastic demand is a price sensitive demand, a firm that price discriminates will therefore set a low price for the price sensitive group and a higher price for the group that is relatively price insensitive. In this way, it maximizes its overall profits. This can also be illustrated as follows. Consider a situation where the firm faces two markets with linear demand curves given by x1 equal to A minus BP1 and x2 equal to C minus DP2. Suppose for simplicity that marginal costs are 0. Now, if the firm is allowed to price discriminate, it will produce where the marginal revenue is equal to the marginal cost, that is equal to 0 in each market, at a price and output combination that is halfway down each demand curve with outputs x1 star equal to A by 2 and x2 star equal to C by 2 and prices P1 star equal to A by 2B and P2 star equal to C by 2D. As illustrated in figure 3.4, if a price discrimination is allowed, the monopolist will charge price P1 star in market 1 and price P2 star in market 2. Since the marginal cost is assumed to be 0, the monopolist will want to operate at a point where the elasticity of demand is -1, which would be halfway down the market demand curve. Thus, the price P1 star is a profit maximizing price. Lowering the price would further reduce revenues in market 1. If the demand in market 2 is very small, the monopolist may not want to lower its price any further in order to sell to this market. It will end up selling only to the large market. In this case, allowing price discrimination will unambiguously increase total output, since the monopolist will find it in its interest to sell to both markets if it can charge a different price in each one. Two-part tariff. As discussed in the previous section, the rationale behind price discrimination is that it enables the monopolist to tap the consumer surplus. The monopolist tries to achieve this through first, second and third degree price discrimination. One method of operationalizing the first and second degree price discrimination is by charging a two-part tariff. Under two-part tariff, the seller charges a price split into two parts, a lump sum charge and a user fee, which varies with the usage. Applications of such a pricing technique include the following. Like Polaroid sells its camera for one price and its film for another. People who are deciding whether or not to purchase the camera presumably consider the price of the film. Another example can be in the case where the company that makes razor blades sells a razor for one price and the blades for another. Again, the price they set for the blades influence the demand for razors and vice versa. The owners of amusement parks can set two prices, one for entry ticket and other for rides. People who want to go to the park will consider the price they want to pay for the rides. This kind of two-part pricing scheme is known as two-part tariff. Consider the pricing problem facing the owners of an amusement park. They can set one price for tickets to get into the park and another price for the rides. The problem is how they should set these prices if they want to maximize profits. It should be noted that the demand for access and the demand for rides are interrelated. The prices that people are willing to pay to get into the park will depend on the price that they have to pay for the rides. So let us make some simplifying assumptions. First, assume that there is only one kind of ride in the amusement park. Secondly, assume that people only desire to go to this park for the rides. Finally, assume that everyone has the same taste for rides. Now figure 4.1 depicts the demand curve and the constant marginal cost curve for rides. As usual, the demand curve slopes down. If the park sets a high price for each ride, fewer rides will be taken. Now suppose that they set a price of P star that leads to a demand for X star rides. Given that the rides cost P star, how much they will be able to charge for admission to the park? The total willingness to pay for X star rides is measured by the consumer's surplus. Hence, the most that the owners of the park can charge for admission is the area labeled consumer surplus in figure 4.1. The total profits to the monopolist is this area plus the profits on the rides, that is P star minus MC into X star. Since the monopolist gets to charge people their consumer surplus, setting price equal to marginal cost and the entry fee equal to the resulting consumer surplus is the profit maximizing policy. This is the rationale behind pricing of amusement parks. There is one price for admission, but then the attractions inside are free. It appears that the marginal cost of the rides is less than the transaction cost of collecting a separate payment for them. Summary. Now let us summarize whatever we have discussed so far. A. Price discrimination is a pricing rule under which different prices are charged in different markets, where the difference in price is greater than the difference in cost. B. To sustain discriminating prices, it is necessary that the price elasticity in the different markets is different. The seller has some monopoly power and the markets are insulated from each other. C. Perfect price discrimination involves charging each customer a different take it or leave it price. This will result in an efficient level of output. D. If a firm can charge different prices into different markets, it will tend to charge the lower price in the market with the more elastic demand. E. If a firm can set a two-part tariff and consumers are identical, then it will generally want to set price equal to marginal cost and make all of its profit from the entry fee.